Hi everyone, last video for the semester, week 13, a review of the course and some exam preparation for you. Just a reminder that there's no workshop in week 13, so please take your time to go through this and the practice exam on the website, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. Okay, first off, week by week summary and some exam questions. So we started off with an introduction to the course, and then in week 2 we started really with the content managers and management, and we considered the POLC framework, so the plan, organise, lead and control framework, the 4 functions of management. And as you recall, this happened, those 4 functions are common across any management role, but the amount each manager does at different levels can vary. This framework also provides the basis for how we design the rest of the course, and throughout the course, we've gone through each one of those functions in one of the lectures at some point. So the next stage then, we looked at managerial environment, uncertainty, complexity and stability. So if we looked at uncertainty, we recognise the environment can be pretty uncertain at times, and that managers don't always have full information. There's a lot of stuff out there happening that we don't quite know how to deal with. And one of those ways to consider this environment, or the environment we work within, was looking at the complexity and the stability of the environment we were working in. Some businesses were highly complex, or some environments were highly complex, and while some were quite simple. Others, and the other dimension of the framework, was stability. Was it a dynamic environment, always changing, always moving on with innovations, or was it quite stable? Week 4, we just had a look at your case study advice. In week 5, we considered leadership and trust. And if you recall, we looked at a number of different theories in terms of leadership, including the path goal theory and different leadership styles. So, put simply, autocratic, participative and laissez-faire leadership styles, and how these affected the way employees were motivated, etc. We also considered developing trust, and trust being a key aspect of leadership, and the ability of a leader or a manager to create a relationship with their staff which helps them receive information, deliver information in, say, a non-threatening way. Okay, week 6, decision making. One of the more abstract sort of lectures from memory. We looked at, among other things, rational decision making, where we say we collect all of the information, and I often use the car as an example there, purchasing a car, where we'd collect all of the information about the particular cars, what we needed, we'd weight that information, and then we'd make a decision based on those weightings and whether the criteria that we were seeking were met by the individual brands of cars. We also then said, well, that's really hard. It's really hard to make a rational decision on everything that we do. And at the other end of that scale, there was intuitive decisions, where we didn't bother trying to measure anything or assess anything or have criteria for anything. We used essentially gut feel and intuitive decision-making processes. Halfway between the two, we considered bounded rationality, with a bit of intuition, but also some rational approaches. So maybe we measure some things and not others that we were looking to see in our decision making. Planning. Pretty straightforward, strategic, tactical, operational levels, and how we go about planning, and the importance of planning for the organisation's success, setting goals, objectives, vision, mission, things like this. Be aware that this is a really basic introduction to planning, and as you go through your management degree, you'll find a lot more in the area of strategic planning, one whole course on it. So recognise this was an interlude, a very quick introduction to planning in the big scheme of things. Structure and design, the key principles of organisational structure and design. We also considered terms like mechanistic, organic, and we looked at different types of structures, the simple structure, the functional structure, divisional structures, matrix structures, network structures and virtual structures, quite a bit in that lecture. And now we can also see that we're getting to the PLOC, so POLC framework. So planning, week 7, organising in week 8, leadership in week 5. Then we moved into managing change and innovation. And I covered one model in some detail, both in the workshops and in the video, and that was Lewin's model of change. And if you recall, unfreeze, change, and refreeze. Very basic model of change. There are many others out there, but this is fairly common in industry. Pardon me. Next one, week 10, understanding groups and teams. And the main thing there we focused on was the group formation and the 5 stages. And if you remember, we had forming, storming, norming, performing, and adjourning. And then we considered the differences between teams and groups. We recognised that teams were far more performance oriented and less individualistic. We also considered the concept of the type of people that we get into teams and the difference between that and groups. And we saw that teams were focused on making sure that we had a match up between people's skills and knowledge, etc., where groups might come together without that specific design approach to forming that group, where everyone's skills sort of maybe a mismatch. There might be some overlap that we may not necessarily want in a team. The next one, week 11, coming close now, motivation and rewarding employees. We covered a pile of models in there. We looked at Hertzberg, we looked at Maslow, Maslow being a very common one, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Hertzberg's a particular favourite of mine, looking at dissatisfaction and satisfaction, hygiene factors and motivators. We then looked at the job characteristics model by Hackham and Oldham, and we saw that there's a number of things that if we design into a job, they would give us particular psychological states of our employees, and that in turn would lead to performance over and above what we might expect normally. We also looked at theory X and theory Y and the differences between that. So personally for me, one of the more interesting topics that we've covered for the semester. Week 12, controlling. We took a systems view and we looked at inputs, processes and outputs, and how we might use feed forward control in the input stage. And during the processes, we looked at concurrent controls, and then in the outputs phase, we looked at feedback controls. Pretty good, interesting type of stuff you'll need to know for your exam. Balanced scorecard there. We also looked at the balanced scorecard as a way of strategic control, and we took a different view than what might be normal in strategy, and we said, well, financial performance is very important, but there's also other areas such as customer satisfaction, internal processes and people and how those relationships form and work. And then also the last stage there the last quadrant there was the learning, innovation and ideas section. I also noted that there was another one coming more common in balanced scorecards, which was the environment and community focus of businesses and whether they achieve on those areas. So essentially that's a quick rundown of what we've covered over the semester. I'll now move into your exams. So exam prep, this is what your exam is going to entail. It has 2 parts. Part A, you'll be asked to choose 3 questions from 5 short answer questions, each worth 10% for a total of 30% in Part A. In Part B, you'll have 20 multiple choice questions worth 1 mark or 1% each, worth therefore 20%, and giving a total of 50% for this exam. Your exam goes for 2 hours and 10 minutes perusal, and you're allowed to write on the exam paper during that perusal. Covers weeks 7 to 12 inclusive, so we don't assess anything prior to week 7. And the last session, which was controlling, is assessed. So now to some examples and some tips. So part A examples, describe the 5 stages of group development. Oh, you can read the questions. What we're looking for here is your discussion of the theory. You need to be able to use the terminologies that we've been using in the course to explain this. For example, a good answer here would be able to tell me that that you know the 5 stages. I just mentioned it. So forming, storming, norming, performing and adjourning. You'd get 5 marks for being able to name those 5 words, And then I'd be looking for the other 5 marks for 10% to explain what those things actually mean. The next one there, describe Maslow's hierarchy of needs motivation theory. You'd need to be able to explain to me the 5 levels in that pyramid, and then what each of those levels mean. I encourage you to use terminology from the textbook, from the lecture notes, things like that. Try not to use examples, try not to use language that is sort of generic, such as that you'd find in the newspaper or something like that. Feel free to put an example of how someone might move through that hierarchy of needs. You might also include criticisms of that model, criticism of that theory if you wish. The last question there, list and discuss the following 3 common forms of departmentalisation. So you'll remember that in the lecture on organisational structure and design, we looked at a number of different ways that organisations can be structured. So here I'd be expecting you to talk about those 3 and compare and contrast. Tell me a little bit about the differences between functional, product and geographical departmentalisation. You need to write a fair bit here. It wouldn't be enough to write, say, 5 lines and say that's that. I wouldn't expect anything more than a page, but somewhere between half a page and a page for each response to these questions. Now remember, you're only choosing 3 out of 5. You're not doing all 5. If you choose to do all 5, we'll only mark 3. Sorry about that. Part B, examples. So these are the multiple choice questions, and as you can see there you go. McClelland's learned needs theory identifies 3 needs. They are. So you can have a look through those the answers and decide which one it is. And before I'll give you some time before I click on it now. Then you can see the second question that I've provided. The 3 basic control methods are, again, sort through the answers and choose the one that you think fits best. Hopefully you've had enough time to think about it. The answer for the first question is answer E. So power, achievement, and affiliation. It was one of the theories, one of the models that I talked about in the motivation and theory lectures. Now the second question, the 3 basic control methods are C. Control, concurrent control, feedback control, and feed-forward control. That shouldn't be too hard to remember because you would have just done that session, that workshop. Okay, that's pretty much it, ladies and gentlemen. Now, in the website, on the Blackboard site, there is a document, a PDF document under the Week 13 folder that has, again, these questions, a few more, as well as another couple multiple choice questions. I'd encourage you to have a look at those, have a go at doing them. The answers are in your textbook. I'm not providing the answers, you've got 2 here, so you'll need to do some work there. To study for this exam, I would suggest going over the Go Soapbox questions, which are available still. I won't be turning that off, so you can go back to each week's Go Soapbox questions, put in the code, which is BUS lowercase 104 space uppercase S 12019. If you're not sure, just go back to the workshops and you'll get that. In terms of where the questions come from, there's week 7 to 12, so that's 5 weeks. I've covered probably a question for each week. There's a bit more of variability in the multiple choice questions, but rest assured they don't go before week 7. And ladies and gentlemen, that's about it. Again, reminder, no workshop in week 13. Please don't show up at the class. You'll sort of be wasting your own time. I'd encourage you to use that time to study, to do those the Go Soapbox questions, or in fact, if you wish, the quiz questions in the electronic textbook. If you haven't purchased the electronic textbook, you'll need to look at the hard copy, and if you've got the version 3 or the 3rd edition, you'd be able to use the questions at the back of that if available. Now, finally, I wish, on behalf of the teaching team, professional staff, good luck for your career and future study. It's been a pleasure working with you this semester, and I hope that you've got something out of the course, and look forward to seeing you maybe in other courses that I teach as you progress through your degree. Again, thank you for your efforts. Recognise it hasn't always been easy and wish you the best. Take care and good luck.